All right, so here's another video that I may or may not publish. Again, I'm basically explaining something to my future self should I forget how to do this, because it's weird, but super friggin' cool. I'm using an Akai MIDIMix, a singular Akai MIDIMix, and I'm using LoopMIDI as a basically as a loopback. I made a channel here. I just typed in M loopback and hit the plus sign, and that creates a MIDI channel. And then I go into my options, and I've got there's like 3 steps to doing what I want to do, but I'm showing how it's set up right now. So I've got that channel now shows up in my MIDI here for Ableton, and so I set it for tracking and remote, and in the output as well, tracking and remote. Now there's the hardware itself, the MIDIMix hardware, which I've got set up right now for tracking and remote. And the MIDIMix itself is programmed to channel 16. So what I'm doing here is I have a Maxforlive device that I found, set output channel. I don't even know who made this. I'll put a link in the description. But basically, do I even have this thing listed here? There we go. Let me get it so that you get the full name. Set output channel MIDI device MIDI map. Yeah, okay. So that's the name of it. But what this does is essentially it will take whatever input you give it. So here's my MIDI channel. I'm using MIDIMix on channel 16. I'm setting it specifically. I don't think I need to, but I am. Just to avoid any crosstalk with the rest of this setup that I'm going to show. So anyway, I'm on channel 16. I specify channel 16 on the input. Now, the output I'm sending to that loop back that I set up earlier. And you can see that right now it's on channel 2, and it's because of this device here, this Maxforlive device, is telling it route the loopback to channel 2. And if I set up a couple of scenes here, like I have a macro knob that's mapped to its channels. So if I just flip through these, you can see now it's channel 12, and it's changing the output of the MIDI track to channel 12. So essentially what I'm doing is I've got my, whatever these are called, scenes. I forget what these are, snapshots. So I've got 8 different snapshots. And the idea here is that I'm going to have this snapshot tells this MIDI track to start sending loopback to channel 1. MIDI channel 1 of the loopback MIDI device, virtual MIDI device. And remember, M loopback is set up for tracking and remote, right? So what I end up with is a singular Akai MIDIMix that can control several different, like as many of these as you want to set up. I've got each one of these represents, let's call it like a page of 8 channels and 24 faders. Well, actually, I guess 9 sliders and 24 knobs. And then, like you've got 24 buttons, but I'm using 8 of them at least. They're the MIDI note buttons, the solo and the arm, and the one where you can hold down shift and it does solo or mute, or think, right? Yeah, right. It's like the record arm. Anyway, you get 3 rows of buttons, and you can change, all of those can be individually set to send to, I've got the device set so that it's always sending everything on channel 16, but because of this, and what I mean is the hardware is set to always send to channel 16, but this whatever MIDI tool rack that I set up is altering where it goes, and it's going to M loopback to whichever one of these channels I send it to. So the Akai has like buttons on it that I'm going to assign 8 of those buttons to go to 8 different MIDI channels, meaning I'm going to map them to this. So it can hear me when I click on MIDI 1, and this is just me hitting the buttons on the Akai. Channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. And so now that I hit 4, I can move. I think I mapped this. Did I map it yet? Nope. Maybe I mapped number 1. Yes. Okay. So I'm moving what's like the master fader on my Akai MIDIMix right now. And now I'm going to hit the button to change this device to channel 2. And now I'm moving that channel 2, but I'm moving the exact same hardware fader. I'm still moving the quote unquote master fader, right? So here I'll open up channel 1 just to show you. I've got like, here, let me go to 1. And then so I got track 1, track 2, track 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then my master is over here because that's the head of the group. And then I open up channel 2. I'll hit the what I've programmed as my switch to MIDI channel 2 button. I'll hit that. You can see how my MIDI track did that. But now we're looking at HP2, and I've got a whole other set of 8 more sliders that I can control. And what this is doing is it's working around the banks when you're using a MIDI device when it's not the control surface version. So like, you know, like this normally says like MIDIMix, MIDIMix, MIDIMix. What I did was I actually went and deleted the folder so that it doesn't find MIDIMix. So like if I, just to show you this Axiom 49, I'll look that up. So I'll use Void Tools everything, Axiom 49. Whoop, wait, 49, there we go. So you can see these locations. This is the folders that hold all of the MIDI instructions that tell it, you know, be a control surface. I basically just looked up the one that said MIDIMix and I deleted that folder. That way I never use my my hardware as a control surface. It's strictly a MIDI device. But when it's like that, normally when it's like that, you only get one set of 8 sliders, 24 knobs, and then the buttons, you know, for MIDI notes. And that's all you get. But with this rig here, I now have up to 16 quote unquote pages of each one of those is its own set of, you know, 8 sliders. Well, I guess 9 sliders with the master, because you can map that to this channel as well. You know, 24 buttons, 24 knobs. And so, you know, I don't need all of those. I just needed it for, basically I need it for 4 sets of headphones, the PA system, and then something else that I'm going to do that not even worth explaining. It's basically a hybrid group. Yeah, so this is how you program that. When you first set this up, like I'll just create a new macro variation. So I've got, this is channel 8. I'll make one that's channel 9. So I'm gonna move this until it says channel 9. Okay, we're on channel 9 now. And I'll create a new, and I'll just rename this demo. Well, actually, I think I ran out of buttons. I might not be able to do this. Let me undo channel 8, because I've already done this 8 times. Let me get rid of this guy. Hybrid 8. Check my mapping real quick. Yeah, it's already mapped. So let me get rid of this. All right. So get out of that. Here is my 8, right? It'll move to where it's supposed to. You know, position 7 is channel 8 because 0 is 1 when you're talking about digital whatever. It's stupid. It's like 127 velocity is actually, you know, 128 spaces because it's a 0, if you know what I'm talking about. All right. So I've got this. I wanted to change my output on my loopback to channel 8. So the first thing I have to do is map it. And I need the Akai MIDIMix to be enabled for remote. So you start with this on. This would be like step 1. You start with it on. And then we're going to do a Control M to start the MIDI mapping. And I'm going to select this guy and I will hit this button here. And that maps it. You can see it's channel 16, which is what my Akai MIDIMix is doing. And it's coming in from there, set to map this guy. So that's great. Now, if I wanted to now go in on what would be my channel 8, I'll just call this rename channel 8 demo. I have, 8 tracks in here, and I want to map all of those to my sliders. You can't do it while your remote is enabled for the MIDI mix. So when you're doing this mapping, you want to disable remote. This is the important part. I know it took me fucking 10 minutes. How long? 11 minutes and 32 seconds to get to this. Sorry. Uncheck remote, and then you can do your mapping. The reason why you do that is because now Ableton is going to be sniffing for remote actions, and you want it to be listening to the remote actions that are coming from loopback, which is your just a quick reminder, it's coming from here. Where is it? Where's my little dude? There he is. It's coming from here, from LoopMIDI, this awesome extra little application. So here's the signal path right now. I've turned off on my hardware, on my Akai, I've turned off remote MIDI tracking. I'm only doing the tracks one, which fine. What's happening is I'm hitting a button on the hardware. It's coming into here. It's coming into my MIDI channel under channel 16. It's going through the chain here, and the chain says go to channel blank. And so I'm gonna physically, because I turned off remote, I'm gonna have to click on channel 8 snapshot to get this to point to channel 8 proper. Now that it's pointed to channel 8, any of the actions that I take on the MIDI mix, like right now I'm twisting a knob, right now I'm moving a slider, if I hit a button, I think you'll see like easier to see when I push a MIDI note. So what's happening now is that MIDI information is being passed through this thing as a filter, sending it out to loopback channel 8. And so now that's going to come straight back in to Ableton. It's going out the output of loopback 8, M loopback. It's going out of the output to M loopback and coming straight back in. So I've got M loopback in inputs and outputs. So you'd think this would be like a feedback loop, between the two of them, but it works. I just turned on track and remote for both the input and output of M loopback, and I only have one of them there. You don't have to do a send and a return. It's just a single entry here, and it works just fine. So whatever, this works. All right, so I hit a button on my hardware. The remote mapping for the hardware is turned off right now because I want to map M loopback channel 8 to all of my sliders here in this this unmapped group of 8 with a master. So now that that's set up like that, just Control M, and we'll slide this over so I can see it better. All right, cool. And now I'm just moving my master fader, and you can see the mapping is MIDI channel 8, meaning that's coming from M loopback. It's not coming from my Akai, it's coming from M loopback. It's like the in-between guy, because it's being sent to the instruction is being sent to M loopback channel 8. So then it loops back literally into Ableton as an input from M loopback, and it shows up as channel 8. All right, so repeating myself over and over here. Moving slider 1, clicking on this guy, moving slider 2, this guy is slider 3, this guy is slider 4, and slider 5, and slider 6, 7, 8. Lovely. Okay, those are mapped. All right, so you'd think you were done, but the problem now is that I've lost my ability to push these buttons. I can't, because I turned off remote on my hardware, because I turned off remote on the MIDI mix, I can no longer get those buttons to work. So you have to, after you're done doing your mapping, go back in and go to MIDI mix and turn on remote again. And so long as the actual hardware mapping, like I put all of these knobs and all of these buttons and sliders on channel 16, as long as there's no conflict with how any of this other stuff. So like I say 16 is like my never touch it kind of one. The rest of these are all on channel 1, channel 2, channel 8 right now for my demo. If it were on 16, then you kind of lose, like that's where you end up with like a feedback loop and it just doesn't do what you want it to do. So here I am now, I've got it set back up where I turned remote back on for my hardware. MIDIMix is broadcasting channel 16. I can see that I'm showing up now on channel 8 demo because of this device here that tells my MIDIMix channel 16 to change to M loopback channel 8. And so now I can go and hit a button here and change it to channel 2. And you can see it changes to channel 2. And if we look at channel 2, I've got control over channel 2. And then I'll hit channel 8. And now I've got control over channel 8. Okay. Last thing, for whatever reason, this guy, you know, this is, I guess, kind of an archaic device. I don't know. It looks a little old. The guy obviously did it for his own kind of work. Like it was just like a job that he needed to do. And I found it super frickin' useful. But you have to add a blank empty chain in order to get the MIDI to pass through. He didn't put a MIDI through in the device itself. So if you're going to set this up, just add a chain so that you've got a empty, you know, pass through for the MIDI information, because this thing isn't actually doing the filtering. This is just talking to the output of your MIDI device, or your MIDI track. It's talking to this and telling it, hey, change your channel. And you could actually get it to change, you know, to different outputs and stuff if you wanted to. And, you know, different channel, like you could map it to do different things. I'm just mapping it to do the channels only. All right, cool. Another long, weird video that's only going to make sense to probably 12 people. Hope this was useful. I think it's fucking awesome. The fact that you can add, you know, up to 16 pages. Well, I guess 15, since you can't use one of the channels because of, like I said, the conflict of what is my base channel that I'm actually broadcasting from versus what are the channels that are being mapped to these. So you get 15 channels or pages, I guess, 15 sets of MIDI Akai MIDIMix face, you know, like all of the knobs, all the sliders, all the buttons. You get 15 of those now while still just functioning as a basic MIDI device and not as a control surface, because I don't want to be a control surface. Sometimes I want to move a knob on a plugin, and sometimes I want to move, you know, knobs in different tracks at the same time simultaneously. Like, that's the use I have for this. I'm going to be setting it up for headphone mixes, like just separate headphone mixes for individual instrumentalists, you know, like people in a band. And then I also want to have a page where I could do like the PA system myself if we're playing a show and there's no sound guy. Or I wanted to set up another one where I do like a whole other, you know, set of like, you know how there's 3 rows of 8 with the knobs? Like, so I'd take like the top row, that would be my drummer. And then the second row would be my guitarist, singer guy. And then the third row would be the other guitarist. And then the bottom row would be the PA system. And that's what I was going to do with channel 8 there. But the other ones, it's going to be like a full set of, you know, the 8 channels, and then each of them will all have their own, it's them setting up their headphone mix, essentially. And then the knobs would just be like, if I needed something like special instructions, like I'd probably just do EQs. Like I'll just throw some EQ 3s on there because who cares? It's a headphone mix, you know. But yeah, this is fucking cool, man. You just have to remember that little thing where you have to disable the remote while you do your mapping of the actual stuff that you're trying to map, and then re-enable it so that you can regain the ability to trigger the snapshots. Right? Cool. Okay. Have a good one. See you.